It was a bright, bustling morning at Liberty Motors, a well-known car dealership in the heart of town. Customers roamed the showroom, admiring sleek cars illuminated by the glow of showroom lights. The dealership was abuzz with activity, a typical scene for this time of day. In the center of all the action was the dealership's manager, Nancy Peterson, a sharp-witted woman in her late 50s with a reputation for getting things done. Nancy, with her perfectly styled hair and a blazer that reflected her no-nonsense attitude, walked the floor with authority, her clipboard in hand. Nancy was used to high expectations, and her team felt it. She pushed them to be better, but often her demands left the staff feeling nervous. Her rookie salesperson, Emma, watched anxiously as Nancy made her rounds, correcting anyone who didn't meet her exacting standards. Despite the pressure, Emma looked up to Nancy, wanting to learn and improve. Nancy was known for her high goals, and she had no tolerance for what she considered time wasters. Suddenly, the glass doors opened, and a man walked in wearing a bright red MAGA hat, a plain black jacket, and blue jeans. He looked around, taking in the showroom. His attire was out of place among the usual high-end clientele. Nancy spotted him immediately and sighed with impatience. Another browser, she thought to herself. Nancy's stride carried her confidently across the polished floor, her heels clicking sharply as she approached him. "Good morning, sir," Nancy greeted, her voice dripping with forced politeness. "Can I help you find something today?" Her eyes assessed him, already dismissing him as a potential customer. The man smiled, his eyes twinkling with interest. "Actually, I'm just looking around," he replied, his tone warm and relaxed. Nancy's expression tightened slightly. "Well, we are quite busy today," she said, her voice hinting that his presence was unwelcome. "If you're not here to buy, I suggest you come back another time when it's less hectic." She glanced at the showroom floor, mentally ticking off all the tasks she still needed to handle. The man nodded, seemingly unfazed by her brusque demeanor. "No problem," he said, glancing at the cars once more before turning toward the door. "Thanks for your time." As he walked away, Emma, who had been watching the interaction, felt a sense of unease. There was something about the man that seemed different, almost familiar. Nancy watched as the man left, shaking her head. "Time wasters," she muttered under her breath before returning her attention to her clipboard. She had no idea that the man she had just dismissed so readily was about to turn her world upside down. Emma couldn't help but watch him leave, her instincts telling her that they hadn't seen the last of him. The day pressed on, the energy in the dealership continuing to build as Nancy moved from task to task, completely unaware of the twist her morning was about to take. The man, Elon Musk, paused by one of the mid-range SUVs, seemingly fascinated. Nancy walked straight up to him, a forced polite smile on her face. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you find something today?" she asked, her voice professional but her expression guarded. Elon looked at her, his demeanor calm and friendly. "I'm interested in learning more about how this dealership operates," he said with a gentle smile. Nancy's eyebrow arched slightly. "Are you here to buy a car, or just to browse?" "We're quite busy today," she replied, making it clear she wasn't interested in browsers. Elon gave a light chuckle, unperturbed. "I'm definitely interested in cars, but more than that, I'm curious about your sales process and your team," he said warmly. Nancy, growing impatient, crossed her arms. "We don't have time to give tours or answer casual questions. If you're not here to make a purchase, I suggest you look elsewhere." Elon nodded, seemingly unfazed by her response. "Thank you for your time," he said, turning to leave. As Elon walked away, he kept a calm demeanor, his eyes glancing once more at the cars on display. His relaxed attitude stood in stark contrast to Nancy's brusque dismissal. From near the coffee station, Emma watched the entire exchange, her brow furrowed with concern. Something about the man seemed different, as though he was not just any ordinary customer. There was an air of confidence and familiarity in the way he carried himself, and Emma's curiosity was piqued. Nancy, meanwhile, was already moving on to her next task, muttering under her breath, "Time waster." She had dismissed him without a second thought, completely oblivious to the significance of who she had just turned away. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of that man. His presence lingered in her thoughts, and she found herself glancing at the glass doors, half expecting him to return. Kevin, a seasoned salesman, approached Emma, noticing her distracted state. "Everything all right, Emma?" he asked, his voice light with curiosity. Emma nodded, but couldn't hide her unease. "Did you see that guy? There was something about him. I can't put my finger on it," she replied. Kevin chuckled. "Don't overthink it, Emma. We get all kinds here. Browsers, buyers, and everything in between." He gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before moving along, but Emma remained unconvinced. She had a gut feeling that the man in the red hat was not just another browser. The day continued, filled with the usual bustle of sales pitches and negotiations, but for Emma, a lingering sense of curiosity remained. Nancy, on the other hand, pushed the interaction to the back of her mind, focusing instead on meeting her sales targets for the day. Little did she know, the encounter with Elon Musk was only the beginning of a dramatic change that was about to unfold at Liberty Motors, a change that would challenge her perspective and redefine her leadership. Later that day, in her office, Nancy was finishing up her reports when her assistant, Laura, entered, her face beaming with excitement. "Nancy, did you hear the news? We're under new ownership. It was finalized today," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling over with enthusiasm. Nancy looked up, surprised, her brow furrowing. "New owner? And no one thought to inform me sooner?" she asked, irritation seeping into her tone. She prided herself on being in the loop, and the idea of being kept in the dark unsettled her. Laura hurried over and placed a memo on Nancy's desk. "They said there's a formal introduction planned soon, but it's official. We've been sold." Nancy picked up the memo, her eyes scanning over the words, searching for a name, but there was none, just a brief announcement. She frowned, her mind racing with questions. "Well, whoever they are, they'd better not interfere with my work here," she said, shrugging it off. The next morning, Nancy gathered her team for their usual meeting. Her voice carried authority as she addressed the room. "All right, everyone, yesterday was decent, but we can do better today. Let's aim to hit 25 units, she said, her tone leaving no room for excuses. Just as Nancy was finishing her motivational speech, the glass doors to the dealership slid open. Heads turned, and there he was, the man from the previous day, Elon Musk. He stood in the doorway, still wearing the same casual outfit, with the unmistakable red MAGA hat perched on his head. Nancy's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as she muttered under her breath, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." She watched as Elon strolled confidently into the dealership, his gaze sweeping over the staff. Before Nancy could step forward to dismiss him, Laura rushed over, her face flushed with excitement. "Nancy, that's him," Laura whispered urgently, her voice barely contained. "He's the new owner." The words hit Nancy like a punch. She felt her stomach drop, her clipboard slipping from her hand and clattering loudly onto the floor. Nancy's face went pale as she processed what Laura had said. The man she had dismissed so brusquely just a day ago was now her boss. Elon Musk smiled warmly at the staff, tipping his hat in greeting. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice filled with cheer. "I'm excited to work with all of you." A stunned silence settled over the room, broken only by the clatter of Nancy's fallen clipboard. She struggled to regain her composure, but her mind raced with thoughts of the previous day's interaction. How could she have known? The staff exchanged wide-eyed glances, unsure of how to react to the new owner standing before them. Elon took a step further into the room, his eyes meeting Nancy's. "I hope we can all work together to make Liberty Motors even better," he said, his tone kind but firm. Nancy swallowed hard, knowing that everything was about to change. The room fell silent, all eyes on Nancy as she stood frozen in disbelief. She felt her confident demeanor start to crumble. Elon continued, "I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to see things for myself before making any changes. What better way than walking through the doors like any other customer?" Nancy forced herself to speak, her voice shaky. "Mr. Musk, I had no idea," she began, but Elon raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "Please call me Elon, and don't worry about it. I appreciated your honesty." It told me a lot about how things are run here. Nancy swallowed hard, feeling a mix of embarrassment and shock. Kevin, one of the seasoned salesmen, whispered to Emma, "Well, this just got interesting." Emma couldn't help but smile, although she felt a pang of sympathy for Nancy. Elon addressed the group, "I want to hear from all of you. What works, what doesn't, and how we can make this place even better." Nancy stood to the side, feeling exposed. For years she had run the dealership with an iron fist, and now, in a matter of moments, everything felt different. The authority she once wielded seemed to slip through her fingers as the eyes of her team, once filled with respect mixed with fear, now held curiosity and surprise. After the initial shock, some of the employees began speaking up, sharing small suggestions and thoughts on how to improve the dealership's processes. Elon listened attentively, nodding and jotting down notes. His demeanor was approachable, and slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. Emma spoke up about the training process for new hires, mentioning how it often left them feeling overwhelmed. Elon smiled warmly at her. "Thank you, Emma. That's exactly the kind of insight I was hoping for," he said, making her feel heard and valued. Nancy watched this exchange, her emotions in turmoil. She had always prided herself on running a tight ship, but now she realized that her methods may have stifled her team's voices. Elon's approach was different. He genuinely wanted to hear from everyone, and that realization struck a chord deep within her. After the meeting, Elon approached Nancy, asking to speak with her privately. In her office, she sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly as she tried to regain her composure. Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful but not unkind. "Nancy, I wanted to talk about our interaction yesterday," he began, his eyes meeting hers directly. Nancy felt her face flush. She took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice soft. "I misjudged you, and I let my assumptions guide my actions. That's not the kind of leader I want to be." Elon nodded, his expression understanding. "I appreciate the apology, Nancy, but my concern is less about how I was treated and more about what that interaction says about the culture here. I want Liberty Motors to be a place where everyone feels valued. Customers, employees, everyone." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You clearly care about this place, and that's why I believe we can make some positive changes together." Nancy nodded, his words resonating with her. She realized that this was a chance not just to redeem herself in Elon's eyes, but also to grow as a leader. "I understand," she said, her voice steadying. "I've always focused on efficiency and results, but I see now that I may have overlooked the people who make those results possible. I want to do better." Elon smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "That's all I needed to hear. Change isn't easy, but with the right mindset, it can be incredibly rewarding. Let's work together to create an environment where people are excited to come to work, where they feel supported and heard." Nancy took a deep breath, a sense of determination rising within her. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," she said. "I want to learn, and I want to make this a place that people are proud to be a part of." Elon stood, extending his hand across the desk. "I believe in second chances, Nancy. Let's make Liberty Motors the best it can be." Nancy shook his hand, a sense of hope replacing the earlier dread. This was her turning point, a chance to reshape not only the dealership but herself as well. As Elon left her office, Nancy remained seated for a moment, absorbing everything that had just transpired. She glanced at the framed photo on her desk, one of her and the team from a few years ago, back when the dealership first opened. It had been a proud moment, but now she realized that true pride would come from leading in a way that inspired others, not just demanded results from them. Standing up, she straightened her blazer and walked out onto the showroom floor. She looked at her team, who were still buzzing with excitement from Elon's visit. For the first time in a long time, Nancy felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel: vulnerability. But with that vulnerability came a new strength, a resolve to be better, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. She approached Emma, who was chatting with Kevin near the coffee station. "Emma," Nancy began, her tone softer than usual. Emma looked up, surprised. "I want to thank you for speaking up today. It took courage, and I want you to know that I'm listening." Emma's eyes widened, a smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, Nancy," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Nancy nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. This was just the beginning. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it fully. The following days were a whirlwind of change. Nancy decided to embrace this opportunity. She started her transformation by addressing her team in a more heartfelt manner during the morning briefing. "I want to acknowledge that I've been tough on all of you," she said, her tone softer. "I thought pushing for perfection was the best way, but I see now that I may have missed the bigger picture. I want to do better, and I'm counting on all of you to help me make this a better place for everyone." The staff looked at her, surprised by her vulnerability. Kevin couldn't help but whisper to Emma, "Is this really Nancy?" Emma elbowed him, but she was just as stunned. Nancy's admission marked a significant shift in how she approached her role. She began implementing small but meaningful changes, starting with a new coffee machine for the break room, something the staff had joked about for months. Nancy also initiated one-on-one meetings with each staff member, genuinely listening to their thoughts and concerns. It wasn't just a formality. She wanted to understand what made their work challenging and what could be improved. This newfound openness slowly began to transform the atmosphere at Liberty Motors. Employees who had once felt undervalued now felt like they had a voice. One afternoon, Nancy noticed Emma struggling to close a deal with a hesitant customer. In the past, Nancy might have taken over, but this time she chose to encourage her instead. "You've got this, Emma," she said quietly, giving her an encouraging nod. Emma took a deep breath, reassured by Nancy's confidence in her, and managed to close the sale. Nancy offered genuine praise afterward. "Great work, Emma," she said, and Emma beamed with pride. It was the kind of positive reinforcement that Nancy realized she had been withholding for too long. In addition to focusing on her team's morale, Nancy worked closely with Elon on larger initiatives that would make the dealership a better place to work. One of those initiatives was a mentorship program for new hires. "We need to make sure no one feels overwhelmed when they start here," Elon had said during one of their meetings, and Nancy wholeheartedly agreed. Together, they paired experienced employees with new hires, fostering a sense of teamwork and community that hadn't been present before. The changes didn't stop there. Nancy also set up training workshops, both for professional skills and personal development. She brought in motivational speakers and even organized a day where the staff could share their stories and struggles. It was a day filled with laughter, tears, and ultimately, a stronger bond among the team members. Nancy found herself thriving in this new environment. She was still firm when needed, but she no longer relied on intimidation. Instead, she led with empathy and a desire to see her team succeed. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, and she often found herself slipping back into old habits. But Elon was there to remind her of the bigger picture, and her team's newfound enthusiasm kept her motivated. One morning, Kevin approached Nancy, a hesitant smile on his face. "You know, Nancy, I never thought I'd say this, but you're really making this place different." "In a good way," he said. Nancy felt a swell of pride and humility at his words. "Thank you, Kevin. It's all of us together," she replied, her voice sincere. Liberty Motors was changing. It was no longer just a place to meet sales quotas. It was becoming a community. And Nancy, once rigid and unyielding, was now the driving force behind that transformation. She knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't facing them alone. She had her team, she had Elon's support, and most importantly, she had a renewed sense of purpose. As she looked out onto the showroom floor, watching her team work with a new sense of camaraderie, Nancy smiled. This was the beginning of something much greater, a journey of growth, both for herself and for everyone around her. And she was ready to lead them, one step at a time, into a brighter future. Weeks later, Liberty Motors hosted a Customer Appreciation Day, an event Nancy had suggested to build a stronger community. Balloons were tied to cars, a food truck was parked outside, and music played softly in the background. Nancy greeted customers at the door, her demeanor far more welcoming than it had ever been. She wore a simple sweater instead of her usual blazer, and there was a warmth in her smile that hadn't been there before. Elon watched from a distance, leaning against a car, a smile playing on his lips. Kevin walked over, standing beside Elon. "Look at her go," he said. "A month ago, I wouldn't have believed it." Elon nodded, his eyes on Nancy as she chatted and laughed with customers. "She's come a long way," he said. "But don't tell her I said that." Kevin chuckled, appreciating the transformation that had taken place in their once unyielding manager. Inside, Nancy gathered her team for a quick pep talk. "Thank you, everyone. This dealership is what it is because of all of you," she said, her voice sincere. "Today isn't just for our customers. It's for us too." Her words were met with cheers, and Nancy felt a swell of pride as she looked at her team. She handed Emma an envelope, announcing that she was Employee of the Month. Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. Nancy nodded, smiling. "You've earned it, Emma. Keep up the great work." As the day went on, the dealership was filled with laughter and joy. Families wandered through the lot, children played with the balloons, and the smell of food from the truck wafted through the air. It was a day unlike any other that Liberty Motors had experienced, filled with warmth and genuine connection. Elon mingled with customers, helping where he could. He even posed for selfies and assisted a young couple in negotiating a financing plan for their dream car. Nancy watched from across the lot, her heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. This was what she had wanted all along, but hadn't known how to achieve: a community, not just a business. She had worked so hard to push her team to success, but now she realized that true success came from the sense of belonging and purpose that filled the air today. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the dealership, Elon approached Nancy. "You've done an amazing job here," he said sincerely. His eyes reflected the admiration he had for her journey. "It feels like a community now, not just a business." Nancy looked at Elon, her earlier insecurities long gone. She had doubted herself so many times, but seeing the smiles on her team's faces and the joy of the customers, she knew they had done something right. "I couldn't have done it without you, Elon," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Elon shook his head. "You did this, Nancy. You were willing to change, and that's the hardest part of all." He looked around at the bustling scene. "The people here look up to you, and not just because you're their boss. They see you as someone who genuinely cares about them." Nancy felt her throat tighten, emotion welling up inside her. She had never imagined that she could be this kind of leader, the kind who inspired rather than intimidated, who lifted others up instead of pushing them down. She took a deep breath, letting herself savor the moment. "Thank you, Elon. It means a lot coming from you," she said. As the event drew to a close, Nancy gathered her team once more. They stood in a circle, tired but happy, their faces glowing in the fading light. "I just want to say one more thing," Nancy began. "I'm so proud of all of you. Today showed me what we're capable of when we work together, not just as co-workers, but as a family." The team cheered, and Nancy felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Emma stepped forward, holding her Employee of the Month envelope close. "Nancy, you've made this place something special," she said. "We all feel it." Kevin nodded in agreement, and soon the entire team was clapping and cheering. It was a moment of unity, of shared accomplishment, and Nancy knew that this was the real reward. Later, as the last customers left and the lights on the lot began to dim, Nancy stood with Elon, watching the team pack up. "So, what's next?" Elon asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Nancy smiled, the kind of smile that came from a place of deep satisfaction. "We keep building, one day at a time," she said. Elon raised his cup of lemonade in a mock toast. "To building," he said, and Nancy clinked her cup against his. "To building," she echoed. Together, they watched as their team finished the day, the sense of camaraderie and purpose lingering in the air. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, and for the first time, Nancy felt truly ready for whatever came next. With the event winding down and the last customers leaving, Nancy and Elon stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "So, what's next?" Elon asked, a twinkle in his eye. Nancy grinned, feeling a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in years. "We keep building, one day at a time," she said. Elon clinked his coffee cup against hers. "I'll drink to that," he said. The two shared a quiet moment of understanding. Nancy knew that her journey as a leader was just beginning, but for the first time, she felt ready for whatever came next. She had learned the value of listening, adapting, and leading with empathy. Liberty Motors was no longer just a dealership, it was a community. As the last of the staff headed home, Nancy looked out over the now empty showroom. The lights inside the dealership glowed warmly, a reflection of the change that had taken place. She turned to Elon, smiling. "I think we're just getting started," she said, her voice filled with determination. Elon nodded, a knowing smile on his face. "That's the spirit," he replied. There was something in his tone that made Nancy feel even more confident, like she truly had the support she needed to continue transforming Liberty Motors. Nancy turned back to the dealership, her heart full. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, ready to face whatever the future held. She thought back to where they had started. The old Nancy who ruled with an iron fist, afraid of losing control, and the person she had become. It was a profound transformation, and she knew that the people around her had been instrumental in making it possible. The next morning, Nancy arrived at the dealership early. She wanted to be there before anyone else, to take a moment to soak in the quiet and reflect on how far they had come. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the lot. She walked through the showroom, touching the cars lightly as she passed, each one representing a journey, a story of someone whose life had been touched by Liberty Motors. She knew the challenges weren't over. There would be hard days ahead, but she also knew that she had a team that believed in her and in each other. And that was enough to take on whatever came their way. She sat down at her desk, her mind already racing with ideas for the next steps. More training programs, expanding their community outreach, maybe even opening another location someday. When the first of her employees walked in, Nancy greeted them with a genuine smile and a cheerful, "Good morning." The employee smiled back, the connection clear. They weren't just working for a dealership, they were part of something bigger, a family. As more staff arrived, Nancy gathered them together briefly. "I know we had a big day yesterday," she began, "but the work doesn't stop. We're going to keep growing, keep improving, and keep making this the best place it can be, for our customers and for us." The staff nodded, their faces filled with determination and pride. Nancy knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would face every obstacle, celebrate every success, and continue to grow, one day at a time. And for the first time, Nancy truly believed in the future they were building. Thank you all for joining us today and watching this incredible journey of transformation. What would you do if you were in Nancy's position? Have you ever had a moment where you realized you needed to change your approach to something? We would love to hear your stories and experiences. Feel free to share them in the comments below or send us an email. Your voice matters, and we'd love to feature some of your stories in future videos. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends. It's through your support that we can continue to bring meaningful stories like this one to you. Remember, growth is all about taking that next step, no matter how small. Let's keep building, one day at a time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.